So thank you for joining us. We have other people on our registration list that are going to join us and some that didn't register that said they're going to join us. But as I mentioned, it is very cold here today. There's a lot of school closing. So some people are probably staying home. As there probably is where everybody is, there's a lot of COVID outbreaks and whatnot. So I'm sure that's hampering people's schedules. But as I think that I mentioned to the other Kyle, your assistant, that we're recording this, and we typically, unless there's something that you don't want us to share, we typically share these with our other credit union folks unable to make it, so that they can benefit from the words of wisdom that we heard today.
Let me ask you a question, Joe, to start. I assume most of you guys, your credit unions, your exams, your Ncua, probably your state too, I don't know, have been like this, virtual, right? I see Jean. Not in her head. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that at Ncua, at least, I don't know about the state regulators, but at the Ncua, we have pretty stringent, even now, in-person stuff to go in person, right? It actually comes up in our union negotiations. But here's my point. Everybody who logged on, including me, right? It said recording is in progress. And right now in the upper left corner, I got a little red thing that says recording, and it's super easy to do. So whoever was the administrator here, Joe or whatever, just hit record, right? Super easy to do. And then as soon as you hang up, you're going to get an email with the file, the audio, so you could forward it to somebody. Here's my point. I'm not just babbling, I promise. Credit unions are allowed to record their Ncua exit exams. And I think right now, and I'm trying to encourage that because I think it solves a lot of problems. It's very normal, as you know, in the private sector. This call is recorded for quality assurance. Even my DC government does that. And it's not as weird to do now. And I think if we normalize it, as long as you guys think it's a good thing, because you can still have your offline conversations. We think it could solve a lot of problems. We think it can improve our customer service because we all behave differently when it's recorded. You also get a transcript, you can search it. And if I was a new examiner and I'm taking over the Vermont area, let's say, I would love to have the backstory of, let me watch the last exam, that you weren't at. I think it would help you get up to speed. For that matter, if I was a new CEO of a credit union and I'm taking over, I would love to be able to sit and watch the last exam, right? Or listen to an audio recording if that's all you had. I think it would clear up a lot of things, just communication. And the beauty is we now live in an era where this is all very possible. So I know if that's what you wanted to talk about, but I can't not, when you mention the recording, say, yes, you're allowed to do it. It's in our handbook for examiners. It says, but the credit union usually asks, it says in the handbook, the examiner should say yes. They have to have a weird reason not to. And again, this isn't 1990 where we need to set up a VHS camera in the room or something. We have ways of recording now that's easier, and it's incredibly useful. We had a situation recently where a credit union appealed something to the board, and having the transcript and everything was so useful for all parties. So that's my little shtick. Sorry to go off on that tangent, but it is a priority of mine. I have a column out yesterday. It's an American Banker. If you Google Kyle Hauptman American Banker, you'll find it. You probably can get through the paywall, and this recording is mentioned in that. So that's that.
Well, that's a good point, Mr. Vice Chair. And Sarah will know, as she mentioned, that I've been doing this for what seems like an eternity, working in this kind of position. And I remember the day well when, there was the he said, she said between an examiner and, the credit union that had been examined and whatnot. And the right recording does, address or can address.
It's an argument you don't have to have, No, I didn't say it that way. It's like, we don't have to have this argument, we could just go to it. And I also think, like you see with police and body cameras, everyone behaved better in the first place, So as you know, this call is monitored for quality assurance. The reason they're telling you and reminding the other person on the phone of that is to head off problems to start with, because that's how we are. When we know things are recorded, we behave differently.
I think that sort of thing used to be, and we probably all felt this way at one point or another, a matter of trust. Maybe a credit union, the first credit union ever that recorded an exit meeting. Maybe the examiner had the "what's the matter? Don't you trust me?" kind of perspective.
That's why I'm trying to normalize it so it's not awkward. I 100% agree that if you've had an examiner for a while and they're going around doing all their exams at different credit unions, and all of a sudden you pull out a phone recorder, hey, just we're going to record it. It feels a little weird. It feels a little aggressive. Whereas that's why we want to try to normalize it, that it's not weird, right? And I'm telling people, if you're in a meeting and you say, hey, can we record this? Or you're on Zoom or WebEx, just like this. If it helps at all, feel free to say, I've openly encouraged this. I put it on my LinkedIn. I put the piece from the examiner manual. And you can call me or Sarah live in the meeting just to bounce it off me. You can say, maybe, if that helps give you cover. And it's not just trust. That's how it can feel. But also in this day and age, we're just used to having information. We're just used to be able to do things, to go back and look at what was said. Like, I don't have a perfect memory. And even if I'm the same examiner a year and a half later, I guarantee we're not going to agree on exactly what was said, because that's just how humans are. And if I was a brand new examiner, I have no idea what happened in the last meeting. I could look at one party's notes or something, but it'd be so much easier. And like you said, he said, she said. So I don't think it's just trust. It's just, I think it's modernization. And again, the pandemic, one silver lining of it is it may have made this easier. The same way we're recording this, it's just so much simpler. As soon as we hang up, you're going to get an email with the file. It's incredibly simple, and this would have been a lot harder years ago. Sarah, you want to tell them when we talked to the other New England group, CCUA, that story the guy told, I think from Massachusetts?
Yeah, Joe, you might remember this story. There was a gentleman who, when the vice chair started talking about this, he immediately raised his hand, and he told the story of he'd had a difficult relationship with an examiner. This was a while ago. Probably no one who's examining credit unions at all today, but finally what he did was he got one of those great big VHS, because that's what all they had, one of those VHS cameras, and he put it on the table for his exit interview. And come to find out, there was no tape in it, but he said the difference in how the examiner treated them was remarkable.
I think the phrase was, it was like flipping a switch.
Yeah.
And again, didn't even have any film in it, and maybe back then it's what you had to do, because as you know, our people at Ncua headquarters here, they should talk to their supervisor if they have any issues, right? Like, they don't realize that people often are very loath to do that. You have to, you don't want to look like you're going over somebody's head, and you're the, what do the kids say, Karen, can I speak to the manager? So anyway, but what else is on your mind?
Well, I was just hoping, I don't know about everybody else, and obviously I was going to encourage everyone to, make comments, ask questions anywhere along the line here, because it's just supposed to be conversation. But, I was wondering if you, Mr. Vice Chair, might be willing to just give your perspectives on the current state of affairs for Ncua and credit unions operating, going into the third year of COVID and whatnot. What do you see as the big issues and
it's amazing,
that sort of thing?
What was it, January 12th? I remember, so it'd be 22 months ago, Thursday, March 12th, was that, and the night before is when everything hit the fan, if you guys may remember. I remember Wednesday night was the first celebrity, Tom Hanks, had COVID, and his wife. The NBA canceled games right then and there during the game. If you remember Mark Cuban on the sideline, there's a famous photo. NCAA March Madness stopped. Disney announced they were shutting everything down that Sunday. It was like the week that, everything sort of became real. And I know in DC, we had our shutdown that weekend. So here we are, 22 months later. I'll say this, that the government response, the federal level, both the Fed and Congress, produced a flood of money. Now, whatever you think about those policies, and obviously we have inflation now, and that's an issue. It did serve a purpose of putting a lot of cash in a lot of pockets, because as you guys probably know, delinquencies are fairly low. Without that flood of money, and again, you could argue how it was done, unemployment's too high, the unemployment benefits too high, there's a lot of arguments, but it's still a lot of cash out there. And when we look at, especially last spring, last summer, when we were in the depths of it, the cash definitely mattered. Now we wonder what comes next, right? What happens when the stimulus goes away and you can now evict people and do foreclosures, as especially as this keeps going. But when we have a well-known airline, and they have an employees credit union. There's hotels company. You know how credit unions are; they're often employee-based, right? A well-known theme park company, right? Airline, hotel, theme park. If anybody's having a bad way during pandemic, it's them. Like if anybody's going to show signs of distress and foreclosures and missed car payments and everything, it means those industries, right? The reality is the flood of cash, at least so far, has kept delinquencies down. Curious to see how it's going for you guys up there. Our chairman, my Democratic counterpart, he's very adamant, has been, for over a year, that a rougher time is coming. Now, he's obviously right in some way. Like, we're going to have another recession in America, because we always do eventually. We did technically have one last year. We lost 22 million jobs in 1 month, right? In the financial crisis, the worst month ever was 800,000. So that was a crazy recession we did have, but again, flood of cash. And so we'll have one. One of the reasons he brings this up is because one thing that's on our plate and on your plate is a premium for the share insurance fund. Okay. That was a hot debate earlier. It's cooled off. Just to review, you guys, like Congress sets it, we have to have 1.2 to 1.5% in our share insurance fund to insure your shares, right? For every $100, we need to have in the fund $1.20 to $1.50. That's what's set. Below 120, we are required by Congress to put together a restoration plan, okay? And we came very, very close to that. I actually thought we were going to dip below 1.20. And as you know, this wasn't bad news, the same way some of your capital levels may have dropped. It wasn't for the 2009 reason where people aren't paying their bills, it's because there was a flood of cash. And we now have all more shares, So let me just say, and this is not a definitive answer one way or the other, it looks like we end 2021 at 1.28, okay? Between 1.2 and 1.3, we have the discretion to do a premium. Our chairman wants one already. He's been very vocal about it, testified in front of the Congress, Senate Banking Committee. And he wants Congress to actually change those numbers. Again, like I said, 1.2 to 1.5, we're required by Congress to have 1.2%, 1.5%, we're required. He asked Congress when he testified to raise those numbers, okay, but only Congress can do that. He wants to use our discretion in the notion that we want to have, better safe than sorry, that something will come. So far, the argument that I've made and Roddy made has won out, which was especially last year. Again, I don't know how much longer this COVID lock is going to happen, but hold on a second. Let's try not to make a decision based on this flood of money. It's kind of artificially, temporarily dropping our equity ratio on our fund, the same way it may have decreased your net worth ratios. And let's wait and see this tide go out and then make decisions based on that, because this weird flood of money, and as you guys know, in 2020, not only was there the flood of stimulus money, unemployment, and there was a refi boom, and there was all kinds of cash. For a while there, it was hard to spend money. It's a strange thing to say in America, but a lot of people's checking accounts piled up with money because you couldn't go out to eat and you couldn't travel and whatever. So we managed to get through that without being forced to do a share, to levy a premium on you guys. Okay, we weren't forced. Below 1.2, we have to put together a plan. And the plan itself can say, do nothing for 2 years and see what happens. But anyway, I just want to because people tend to ask about that. What's going to happen? The reality is we only invest in treasuries, so that's an issue. Like, we don't earn that much money in the fund. If we were earning 10% a year in our fund, it could deal with a lot of losses, a lot of credit union collapses, a lot of checks we had to write. But we don't. We earn treasury interest, and you guys know what that is. So that's my shtick on the insurance premiums for you guys.
I know our national association has an official position of not supporting, an increase of that 1.5 to whatever it might be legislatively anyway in Congress. But I haven't heard anything of late about any traction on that recently, as far as Congress is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I don't work there anymore in that, in the legislative body, but I don't see how you would get enough traction to raise that, because even within the 1.2 to 1.5, like, you could go pretty far in the other direction without Congress having to do anything. What if we set the normal operating level at 1.48, you know, and we levied a premium below that? I mean, that would be dramatically different than what we have now, and that can be done without Congress. But, you know, that's Chairman Harper's view, that he wants to raise all the numbers involved, you know.
Right.
I don't know where he wants, I don't know if he was in charge where he put the 1.5, he may have said it, I don't recall, but that is his view. What would help avoid this conversation fading away? Well, obviously, if you guys don't have a lot of losses, but if things open up when we get back to normal and America does what it does best, which is get money out of people's wallets, right? We are the undisputed world champion at getting people to spend money. So that's the X factor, you know.
Any comments, questions from anybody on this or any other issue before I just randomly latch onto another one? No. Okay, so let me ask you something else, Mr. Vice Chair. Not ask, but cite another area. You know, I think you mentioned early on about you know, exams and having been remote and so on and so forth. Do you see that kind of approach that Ncua has been using over the past 2 years?
Yeah,
Being a new way of doing exams in the future, or is it still a temporary approach?
yeah. So let me ask you first, Joe. When you mentioned National Lobbying Group, were you talking about CUNA or NAFCU?
CUNA.
Okay. CUNA also has a public policy of they want to keep the virtual even when we go to normal times, partly because it saves money. Ncua actually spent less money in 2020, first budget decrease in like 40 years, not because we did anything, but just because we didn't travel, right? The other reason is the thing I mentioned earlier, which is it's so easy to record on these, and it's just so much easier to do. You know, even if you set up an old school camera, you don't get a transcript. You know, you can't search it. You know, so the customer service and transparency that we provide as your insurer and your regulator, it's kind of easy to do. Like you said, if it's a weird trust issue, if all of a sudden you pull out some recording device in a meeting room and you never did it before, but people kind of assume on these devices it's recorded. Hell, even if you didn't have the official recording on, there's nothing stopping anybody from setting up something and recording the screen, you know? So there's that. We do want to learn, and that's why we want your input. You know, these things ideally should be a conversation instead of me talking at you, right? Because I don't get around much. I didn't use most of my travel budget last year. I don't get out and talk to people very much. So it's good to hear from you. We want to get everything positive from the pandemic, right? Not just Ncua, but life in general, right? We deserve some positives from all this mess. I know and there are some, right? They've changed a bunch of rules, telemedicine here in DC, you can do. I think some of this stuff's going to change. I think we're still going to order from some restaurants on a QR code for years to come. But what can we do? And I do wonder if, let's say there's a tiny credit union that's, you know, a number one, you know, super stable, tons of capital, and it's really far away in the east, wherever, and it takes 2 flights and a 5-hour drive in a rental car to get to northern Montana or whatever. Like, and we have to, and you guys have to pay for all this travel and everything, right? And the time. And the examiner is taking time away from their family or whatever, driving through back roads to get someplace. Is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Maybe that could be done virtually. Or we can have a situation where you can earn what your preference is, because some people don't like virtual. Okay, so they flat out want to go back. You guys probably have members like that too. They want to go back to how it was and as soon as we can. And I understand that. But I'm thinking about something where, like, if you ace your exam, not only can you go to an 18-month cycle instead of 12 months, but perhaps you get a choice of your next one, something like that. Because we don't know. There are people in our union who we're negotiating with who very much want to go back to in person. One could say part of it is because they get benefits from it, right? They get their per diem, which is untaxed. They get a bonus for how many nights they're on the road. Plus, you know, any of those jobs where you travel a lot, you get used to being Marriott Platinum and, you know, Hilton, whatever. You know, your vacations are basically free because you get all these points, you know. So there is definitely a force to go back to in-person exams. I'm curious if you guys have a view on it. And just to be fair, whenever we have these, there's usually multiple differing views. So it's I don't think any view anybody here would express that would be that strange, you know.
You mentioned exam frequency briefly, and do you see that lengthening out? Any change in approach to that? Because I know one of the things that we hear a lot between credit unions and banks is the, more calendar months between exams for the banking industry than there is for credit unions on average anyway.
Well, I like the idea of earning it because it aligns all the incentives, everybody's. You saw that in the banking world, they kept raising the threshold, that if you decide what earning it means, Camel 1, Camel 1, 2 with a 1 in management, whatever it is, and I know we do some version of this, that if you can earn an 18-month cycle, that means you probably want to keep it. So that's good. You probably want to have your act together, have your capital, in line, and you want to keep it. The ones that didn't earn the 18-month cycle or other goodies, like having virtual if you want, other goodies, they want to get them. So that's good for us. And from our standpoint, that means that we're focusing on the credit unions that really do have issues, which is where we should be focusing our time. So I think that it's a beautiful scenario where all the incentives are aligned. Do you guys have suggestions on how you think it should be done?
Anybody?
If you were in charge of NCUA, what would you do? Yeah.
This is Jean Guyard, and I'm from Vermont Federal Credit Union. And I have to say that I thought that the remote exams worked really well. I do have my CFO here, so I'm not sure that he would agree, but from my point of view, it worked really well. The other thing that's happened, I've found in the last few years, is that the exams have gone from confrontational to helpful. And we contact our examiner more often to ask a question that we have in the past. And the 18-month is great. So I'm hoping you figure out a way to get us to keep the 18-month exams. Thank you.
Jean, let me ask, why would it have gone from confrontational to helpful?
We're able now to talk about points that the examiners bring up that it was black and white for us anyway. It was black and white in the past. And suddenly one of the examiners said, we're here to help you, not to be, this is not a confrontational situation. We're here to be helpful. So they stated it, and that happened probably 5 years ago.
So the change wasn't COVID time going to virtual.
No.
It's a longer term change?
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago. Things just started to change.
So the good news is that it shouldn't be confrontational. It's not anymore. The bad news is if it started 5 years ago, that means I can't take any credit for it, and I would like to, but I definitely can't on that one. So, all right, yeah, and so we think that we can modernize, and it's a big priority for me, the way the regulated and regulator treat each other. And when you're behind closed doors with no feedback, and you guys know that we live in a world where there's tons of real-time customer service feedback and it helps the relationship, right? I don't know if you ever use Uber or Lyft up there, but in general, people say the relationship is better in rideshare than it is in regular old school taxis. The way people treat, the cleanliness car. And obviously it's not because we're better human beings, right? I mean, half the Uber drivers are former taxi drivers and we're the same passengers we always were. Why is it better? Because we rate each other right away, immediately. And each party has an incentive, to treat each other well. And they communicate their priorities, for both Uber and Lyft. Cleanliness is one of the top 2 things they ask about. So we're trying to keep that, expand on that helpfulness you said, Jane, right? I mean, sometimes as a regulator or an insurer, there's tough conversations that have to be had. It happens. But you should feel like we are availing ourselves of all of the modern tools for customer service. We now have a pilot program we've launched. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it yet. It's kind of like Uber or Lyft, or if you use DoorDash or any of those services, you can't even use them again until you rate the last experience. Okay. So it eliminates the narc problem. Nobody's complaining, calling the complaint line. Everybody's rating each other every time. Nobody's the weird one that asks for the manager, causing trouble. It's just totally normal. And you guys know that, you can't check out of a hotel and within 6 hours, you've gotten an email that says, how was your stay at the Burlington Marriott? It's almost annoying how many you get. And the main thing is the employees know you're getting it right away. And they know exactly, like if you say my check-in was good or bad, or the breakfast order, they know who was there and what was it, and it's done right away, right? Whereas if you wait, and almost nobody would call it. If all you had was a complaint line, that means they don't care. And that's what we're trying to change. We have a pilot out right now. It's just quick yes, no questions. I don't know if, again, maybe one of you have dealt with this already. And we want to get it to like Uber, DoorDash, all the things we and our examiners are used to. And with the recording, we think that right there can change a lot of the relationship, and just help with all the things that technology has done for us. It's help with memory problems. We all carry cameras around. Basically, we all have photographic memories now if we want to, because we can take a picture of anything, anytime. My teacher when I was younger said, you got multiplication table. You're not going to have a calculator with you all the time. Actually, Ms. Johnson, I do have a calculator with me all the time. Right. So we just want to modernize that, Gene. I don't know if this makes any sense, but we've got that pilot. We're trying to promote the recording. We had a situation recently where a credit union didn't do an innovative thing they want to do. This was that crypto exchange announcement. You may have just seen it last month. And all it is, and you were always allowed to do this. We just made it clear because a lot of people were like, oh, can we do this? And if you can connect to a crypto exchange, and people can buy and sell Bitcoin via your credit union app if you want to. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I don't know how the finances work, but the credit union gets a piece of it. And they were seeing a lot of outflows, ACHs to Coinbase and places like that. So here's my point. I asked a credit union because they were interested in it. I said, why haven't you done this already? Like, what is stopping you? And they said when they mentioned this connection to a third party, people buy and sell Bitcoin, the examiner and the supervisor, the word risky was used, and that stopped the project. That involved 3 companies, well, a credit union and 2 companies, just that one comment. And it turned out from talking to them, we have no recording. It was what I suspected it was they used the word risky to refer to Bitcoin itself as an investor. All right, fair enough, right? We're not giving investment advice here. But the point is that offhand comment, and they happened to talk to me at an event, and I happened to speak to their supervisor, and they said, no, they were talking about Bitcoin. That's how much can happen based on, as you know, an offhand comment. A tone can literally halt a project that was going to bring them significant non-interest income, or they thought it was best for them and their members, all from an offhand comment that got taken the wrong way. So it's not that he said she had, it's just misunderstanding each other, and that's the sort of thing that I think we want to avoid. Like, no, we never said the project was risky. We just said Bitcoin was risky. And that halted a project. Anyway, so that's just a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We live in an era in 2022, we don't have to have these issues, and the same with regulatory clarity. The thing they wanted to do wasn't breaking any rules. That's why the guidance we put out was just guidance. We didn't have to vote on anything. It wasn't a rule. It was just, yes, you can do these things, Anyway, so just before we finish up, that does tie into one other priority I have, which is fintechs and stuff. Instead of the traditional finance sector complaining about these unregulated fintechs, credit unions should be able to do the things that you think are useful partnerships, et cetera. So we don't have an Uber versus taxi argument, and that was part of the step 1 from our standpoint, was that crypto exchange guidance, but hopefully there's more to come. We don't want credit unions to go the way of Blockbuster Video in the long term because your regulator didn't provide enough clarity. Can you use blockchain for title insurance? All that sort of thing. It's just like when the internet came out in '98, or it got popular, with broadband. You did the same old things you always did, but in a different way. Payments, withdrawals, checking your balance, etc. Same stuff you did before the internet, but you do it differently now. We think the same is true of fintech and blockchain, etc. So just want to get that piece in there. Hey, Sarah, do you want to speak up here and ask this question? Sarah asked me, 5300 report. Sarah, you follow this more closely than I do. God bless. Can you answer that question and see if we can get the feedback here?
Sure. Thank you. As you all know, we are we're making changes to the 5300 report, and just wanted to find out how you all are planning for it, what you're seeing, what are your cores telling you, how good or bad any thoughts that you'd like to share with the vice chairman on the changes to the 5300 report and being ready for them?
We asked us, we're
I haven't
hearing-
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't actually seen the changes yet. I got notification of them yesterday, and I haven't heard anything from our vendor yet as to whether they'll be ready. I assume they will be, but I have not heard that
And-
for sure.
Is there a reason to think that A, the vendor might not be, and B, if they're not, is a major problem?
Yeah, because we rely on a lot of automated processes through that vendor to populate the 5300. So if there's some major changes and they're not going to be ready, that is going to change how we get it ready for you guys.
Sarah, do you think we should have an information, I don't know how many participants, an information gathering call just like this one with these vendors, just to lay out what we think is supposed to happen, and are they on top of it?
I used to do that when I was in the credit union space. We would bring the vendors together for that.
And they can learn from each other. They
Yeah.
don't need us to talk with each other, but it
Right,
wouldn't, I
right.
don't know the details here, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
shock me if vendor A has figured it out and vendor B hasn't quite figured it out yet, and they might want to chat, but just because we don't want to put something through that's a disaster.
They might not respond to us as much as they would respond to a credit union.
Or the league should
but-
do this then, maybe.
Yeah, perhaps. But I mean, we are talking 3 months out here.
But-
So, I do know that there are vendors out there that it's any changes takes a year to get done. And so that's the reason for the question is,
the
what are you
concerns
hearing?
that-
from
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I know our vendor, when there's been small changes, they've typically gotten them done within whatever the quarter is that they've been notified, but it sounds like this is sort of a major overhaul, and honestly, I haven't looked at it yet, so I don't really know what's changed, but this may take longer than a quarter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lisa, I put my email address in my name up there. When you find
Okay.
out, or any of you here, if you wouldn't mind just telling us, we're trying to gauge how we've been told that it's a absolute streamlining of the 5300 report. The issue is it's still a change, and even changes for the good require planning and a little bit more time. And it's not unusual for us or any of us to forget that there's always this other cog, that this other group out there, the vendors that are the cores that we are so dependent on. Credit unions are so dependent on. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing what you find out, yeah.
Yeah, and if you're hearing.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And I assume that the new version and all the changes are out on the website.
Yes. And let me see if after this call, I can find you a link for all of that.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
I'll send it to Joe and he can send it to everybody. How's that?
Sure.
If I was a service provider and 8 weeks from now was actually, a little longer than that, 12 weeks, and I wasn't able to provide it, I think I'd want to communicate that. But Sarah, I think you're right. The vendors probably don't want to tell us that they're having problems, even if they are, right? Is that your concern? That they don't want to raise their hand, especially in front of their.
My
competitors and say
actual concern is, do they even know?
So this is Harry Jacobson. I'm the CFO at Vermont Federal Credit Union. And to my knowledge, you talked about streamlining changes. There's nothing major on there. I don't see the vendors having any issue. I mean, you got a couple you got the risk-based capital coming, but that's going to be calculated, on the March 31st call report automatically by Ncua. And you got subordinated debt. But I'm not aware of anything material besides the streamlining changes that you talked about that's going to really, I see, have an impact by the vendors.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Harry.
But you're right. I think, Sarah, if somebody wasn't aware of this coming change or wasn't really focused on what they had to do, and if we can at least raise awareness, or the leagues can, if they didn't know already, finding out today, January 12th, is better than finding out on March 30th, that things are not as easy. So I think if we raise awareness on this, we can figure out if we have to delay it. We don't want to delay it, but just it's a problem that we might be able to solve with communication with all parties.
Okay.
By the way, Chairman Harper would use this, and he has, as an example of why he thinks Ncua should have direct regulatory supervisory authority over the third-party vendors, not just credit unions. He's been very adamant about this. I think some of the banking agencies do to some extent. So the more problems there are at the vendors, the better his argument is for Ncua to start now examining all the QSOs and third-party vendors and all that. He very much wants vendor authority. And yeah, if stories of this sort of thing being a fiasco add to his point. So, hey, Kyle, were we on? Is this supposed to be half hour? Have we gone over time? Is this supposed to be an hour? What?
I have it scheduled for 30, so
right.
we can wrap up whenever.
Just one quick thing, Mr. Vice Chair, before we wrap up. I just noticed, and well, actually I noticed a while ago, but I want to make sure to introduce you to Molly Dillon, whose name you see on the screen, who is the Deputy Commissioner of our state financial regulator. So she has a lot of insights into the Vermont credit union movement. Thank you, Molly, for joining us today. And your microphone is off.
Yeah,
Oh, now
thank
it's
you.
on. Thank you, Molly.
So you're from the state regulatory side.
Yes. Yes,
How
I
has-
am.
How has virtual been for you guys? Have you done virtual exams for everything?
Oh, yes, yes. I would say from our point of view, the virtual exams have helped us realize some efficiencies in, reviewing files and things like that. We do appreciate the importance of scheduling during an exam to make sure there's still a lot of contact. We've heard that over and over again. And I think we would look forward to getting back together for some of those meetings and the exit. And we have been for a while attending some of the board meetings virtually, even before COVID, because the state is long and rural. And so some virtual meetings have been implemented even prior to COVID to increase board membership.
So that example I gave, about driving 4 hours through the snow through back roads to get to some little credit union that is, 20% capital, maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze there,
Yeah.
And I know Vermont terrain, hey, do you know, I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Michael
Pichek.
Pichek. Pichek, that's how you say it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's my boss.
Okay, yeah. He and I served together on Securities Exchange Commission.
Yeah.
We were on, wait, you know that?
Yeah.
I was surprised. Yeah, it was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
That was cool. And I remember I left for another job during our 2-year term, and then he left. Is that appointed in Vermont?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So he was the deputy commissioner of the securities division and then was appointed as commissioner.
That's cool. Yeah. All right. I'm impressed it's remarkable that that he and I were one of 2 of 16 members on that thing back then. All right. Yeah. Are you a Burlington person?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Chris Pearson is the state senator. I don't know if you know him. He's a friend of mine from high school, but.
Oh, really? I don't know him.
All right. He's you have your lefty party there, progressives, the moose signal, the moose. So yeah, he worked, he was Bernie Sanders' driver way back in the day. Bernie was mayor.
Oh, really?
And then now he's a state senator. We have different politics, we could say that, but he and I knew each other as little kids, so known him for a long time. But
well, I do know Chris Pearson, so I'll be sure to call on you when we have some advocacy issue in the Senate, or maybe stay away from you depending on your political views.
Well, keep in mind, he's state Senate, right? So Montpelier,
yeah.
So he's state only. So I think
Right.
one of the reasons that our politics don't clash that much is we deal with very different issues, like, and whatever he's doing in Vermont, whatever. And I think his district would be somebody kind of his politics anyway. So if it's not him, it's going to be somebody similar. But hey, how do you know Chris, Joe? Sorry to bore everybody else with the,
Just advocacy related, through a legislative process.
Well, you can tell him Kyle Hauptman said hi. Yeah.
I sure will.
All right.
I'm sure Joe's
Well-
mentioned to you that it's -3 here, so the squeeze thing is frozen.
You're going to have a nice warm lunchtime and maybe up to 0,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That's right.
Brutal cold. All right. Well, anyway, if you guys are probably fellow Pats fans.
There we go.
Yep. Big game this weekend. I don't feel that good about it, but playoffs against Buffalo in Buffalo.
Yeah,
My
that'll be
guess
chilly.
will be maybe freezing, if not snowing for that game, but we'll see. All right, let's wrap
Thank
it
you
up.
very much,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mark.
Vice Chair. We greatly appreciate you taking time to spend with us on a cold day in Vermont, and cold where you are as well, maybe not quite as cold. And thank you to everyone that was able to spend time with us today.
Let's do it in person someday. Do you guys have an annual convention or something?
We do. Our
normal
next
times?
annual meeting is in May of this coming year up by the Canadian border at a resort, subject to whatever happens with
Yeah.
COVID between now and then, of course.
I hear that. Well, sometime between, I have 4 years left on my term, so I just hope that someday we are hanging out at some beautiful lakeside thing and we're doing it in person and having fun. So I look
Awesome.
forward to that. I'm taking off. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kyle.
Have a good rest of your day. Stay warm.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.